Hello there, and welcome to Gina, Gardiner and Friends. And boy, have I got a great guest for you today. My guest today is Shirley Jump. She's a New York Times best-selling author. She's written 84 books, and those have been seen in 24 countries. She's the owner of JumpStart Creative Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of telling your story. Shirley, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So before we start talking about other people's stories, share your story.
So I've always wanted to be a writer. I'm one of those people that knew what I wanted to be from the minute I could read. And my parents sponsored a family from Laos when I was 11 years old, and it was life-changing. So I wrote a little essay about it and sent it off to the local paper, and they bought it and ran a story on me and my family. And that was it. I was hooked from there. I became a journalist for a little while in Boston and realized that I didn't have that Geraldo Rivera killer instinct to get the story. And I didn't like who I had to be to get the story. So I quit being a freelancer for newspapers and went into magazines and then eventually into books. So I've done a little bit of everything, but if it involves words, I've written it.
It sounds amazing. You know, one of the things that I often say to people is that you are the author of your own life story. By taking radical responsibility for you and how you turn up, that makes all the difference. But I know there are so many people who have an amazing story, but aren't able to articulate that and get that out in the world. So talk me through your work and what you do and how that can help.
So my job, and I started this way back when I used to ghostwrite for a bookseller who was on Antiques Roadshow, and he had a column every week, and he could talk about rare books really well, but he couldn't write about it. And I realized that for a lot of people, we write orally, but not necessarily to the keyboard. And my best thinking is on the keyboard. So for, I'd say, 95% of my clients, what they do is they talk to me, and I use those journalist skills that I had to start asking them questions to get them to delve a little deeper, to share their story. And it doesn't matter if they're doing a book on conflict mediation or mindset change, or they're doing a memoir. It's always about what happened to them personally. I was just talking to a client just before this call about his conflict mediation book, and he was saying that it didn't feel like it was progressing right. I said, well, it's because we're not personal enough, and we have to get down to why are you in this field and what happened when you were a kid that put you in this field, because that's what brings them together and makes them unique. So my job is to always find that unique component of somebody and bring it out. And it's a matter of trust and relationship. It takes a while. It doesn't happen on the first chapter. It takes a couple chapters before they open up. But that's what I'm always trying to do, is get to the heart of who they are and why they are doing what they're doing.
Why do you think it's so important for people to tell their story?
Because that's how we impact other people. If we are open and vulnerable, we impact other people. A lot of what I've gone through in my life has been because other people have said things over the years, and it's like a drip campaign where it begins to add up, and you hear all these messages from other people that have been there and done that. And you say, okay, I can do that too. And that's what spurs you to change. And I think we are too protective and too afraid of being vulnerable. So when we do open up, that's when we can begin to show other people that life can be different, or you can turn it around, or you can live your purpose, or whatever your message happens to be.
You know, I think that we are hot-wired to think and to accept stories. If you think back to cavemen and women, long before there was the written word, people passed on their knowledge and their history, didn't they, through stories?
Right.
And it's my belief, and I'd be really interested in your take on it, that it's because of that long history of that wiring that says we want to know about other people, we want to understand them, that we respond so much to the personal side of the story, whatever that story may be.
Right, because we see a little bit of ourselves in them, right? And that's why, you know, you're watching Entertainment Tonight or TMZ or whatever, and you're looking at J-Lo and Ben Affleck, and you see a little bit of yourself, right, in the woman that can't seem to commit, and the second chance love story. We see a little bit of ourselves in other people, whether they're celebrities or just people in our circle, and it's their story that binds us to them.
I think that's so powerful, isn't it? That
Mhm.
we're all so much more connected than we are perhaps think, but there's more of us that is the same than is different. And it's through
Right.
those stories that I think that we can resonate with somebody else, whatever their circumstances. There's going to be commonalities, aren't there?
Right. I work with a lot of celebrities. Like I just did a book with a former NFL player, and he was an addict to alcohol and prescription meds. And I knew when I did the book that people were going to struggle to relate to him because he's an NFL player, right? Top of the top, at the Super Bowl, all of that. So I brought it down to that moment where he tried to commit suicide after his first Super Bowl. And people can understand like that. Lots of us have been that low. Lots of us have felt like we were an imposter or that we didn't deserve the greatness that we had. And so by taking somebody who was at the pinnacle and showing them as a human being like the rest of us, people hopefully relate to his story right away and understand him.
I think that's so powerful.
Mhm.
It's so easy, particularly with celebrities, to assume
Mhm.
that their lives are perfect. It's all right for them. They're rich. They've got acclaim, and make the assumption that that solves all their problems. And of course, nothing could be further than the truth.
Exactly. Right. And that's part of my job, is to bring out the reality in these people's lives so that other people can learn from that. And this is what he goes around the country talking about his story and how he recovered and is beginning to make amends with everybody in his life. And because he's getting human and he's not just playing the NFL player, he's making a difference in people's lives.
Isn't it interesting, don't you think, how often people hit rock bottom?
Mhm.
And that's a turning point. And part of the turning point is that they make the decision that they're going to use the experience and the lesson that they've learned to help others. And that's
Right.
a big part of their recovery.
It is, because even his book is about the 12 steps, and the 12th step is about helping other people, right? And when you start taking the focus off yourself and you start thinking about others, that's when you begin to have a true recovery from whatever you're going through, I think, personally. And I think that's what we're all here to do, not to just help ourselves to get to the top, but to help other people and lift them up from wherever they're at.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to go for a short break, but when we come back, I'd like to explore with you how you go about getting people to open up, because that's a big thing, isn't it? Particularly for celebrities who have this persona where everything is so easy and so perfect, that you actually are able to get through that hard shell and touch the real person inside. So don't go away. We'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, welcome back. My guest Shirley Jump and I are talking about how important it is to share your story. And I asked Shirley just before the break to share with us how she is able to help people be open about perhaps the things in their life that until that time they've kept hidden.
So for me, it's about building that trust and relationship. And a while ago, I made a vow with my company that I would only do books that had impact. I'm not going to do some ego stroking book for some billionaire who wants to just say, I'm great, I did all these things. I wanted books that had impact, regardless of whether they were celebrities or ordinary people. Because I've been through some life-changing, difficult lessons myself. I've been to the bottom in a different way than some of my clients and climbed back out. And so for me, the way to get them to trust me and to open up to me is to share what I've been through and to be very transparent about, yes, I understand that because I have been there. And that builds a commonality between us. They're like, okay, you get it. You understand how I did this. I was never an NFL player, but I understand going through the 12 steps and, changing your life and redoing your focus. Some clients don't open up right away. Some clients take a while, especially the bigger celebrities that I've worked with. Some of them take a long time to kind of shed that exterior. But, you just keep nudging at them a little bit more and asking them a little bit more questions and opening up that a little bit more. And then reinforcing to them how sharing this story about being abused or about being addicted to drugs is going to impact other people. And when they begin to see that their story can make a difference for others, they're more open to sharing it. And it takes a while. It just takes a while to build that trust. A book is a year-long process in general. So I've got a lot of conversations with them over the course of that year. So that helps too.
Isn't it interesting how presumably you're a stranger to them when you first start talking to them, but how that relationship, I suspect, becomes very special because they are sharing that inner part of them with you. And so, you know, I applaud you in the sense that creating that safe space where people feel that they can share with you is incredibly precious.
They know that I have their best interests at heart too. Some clients overshare or share too much in the wrong direction. And I'll bring them back and say, okay, this is going to alienate part of your audience, or this is not going to reflect well on you, or you might not want your children reading this, because I'm always cognizant of what they've got going on around them. And it's not painting a pretty picture. It's just kind of keeping their best interests at heart so that their book has the maximum amount of impact on people around them. And the way I approach books when I ghostwrite is, what are you going to do with it? Because it's really hard to make money on Amazon, right? Because there's 16 million books out there. Less than 1% of authors make a living wage on Amazon. So your money is not there. Your money's in speaking and coaching and webinars. And so I start with where my client's going to go with it first. Are you going to do women's retreats? Are you going to do speeches? Okay, then let's start directing that towards that audience that you're going to be talking to and what they need to hear and what message you want to get across to them.
I think that's a really important, you know, thinking about what's the outcome that you want. You know, I've written several books myself, and that for me has always been the important thing. You know, who is the audience and what is it I want them to achieve out of reading the book that I've written. But it's interesting for me how many people who perhaps aren't celebrities, who have an amazing story, and I've interviewed some of them on my shows, that they are so humble and unaware that what they have done is actually quite extraordinary, that their story needs to be told. And I wonder what advice you had for those people who perhaps don't have the funds to employ a ghostwriter, or don't even realize that that's a possibility. How can they get their story out there?
Well, I highly recommend setting up a conversation with an experienced ghostwriter or editor in the beginning. Now, hiring me to do the whole book is a pretty expensive proposition, yes. But I want to work with them. It's very inexpensive to just do the outline with me. So you at least have a direction. You know what your target audience is going to be. I have a background in journalism, marketing, and magazines and books. So I understand how to market things as well. So I sit down with them and help them find the right direction. Because what a lot of authors do is kind of meander for chapters and chapters and chapters. And it's not really their fault. It's that structure to books is something you have to learn, just like structure to a house you have to learn. You can't just take a bunch of lumber and put it into a house, even though we know how it works. We'd be lost, right? So sitting down with a good editor can help you have that direction from the start so that every effort that you make when you're writing is going in the right direction. And as for ordinary people sharing their stories, just think about the person that shared their story with you, whether it was some, panhandler you met on the street or some a stranger woman that you met at the Macy's counter. How did their words impact you? And you can be that person for the others around you with sharing your story.
I think that is such an important message, that things that we take for granted because it's who we are and the lives that we lead can actually make such a difference to other people. We're going to go to a short break now. Don't go away, because we have so much more wealth to share with you, because every one of you has got a story. And I am sure that there are many of you that are listening to this that have a story that could really make a difference to other people. So see you in a minute. Welcome back. One of the questions I'd like to ask you is, you've shared many people's story, but do you have a book which shares your story?
Don't yet. I write fiction. My career, most of my career has been in fiction, but my specialty is in nonfiction, because I actually started in nonfiction and the fiction became an offshoot of that. But I would say that there's a little bit of my story in every single novel that I write. I haven't written my own story per se, but I'm awfully busy sharing everybody else's. So I do speak about it and everything else, but I haven't written it, no. And it's kind of the carpenter who never works on his own house sort of thing. I'm pretty busy.
I was just thinking the same thing, yes, the painter and decorator who has put 2 pieces of wallpaper up and not finished. What sort of fiction do you write?
So I started off in romance, and because of the journalism thing, right, I was covering suicides and hit and runs and things like that. So I wanted to write things that made people happy. So I started off with fiction and romance, then moved into women's fiction, and now I'm doing suspense. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go next because I'm at the end of my contract. So I'm debating where to go next with my career, because the nonfiction it's been keeping me very, very busy. I write about 12 books a year between my clients and my own. So it's a lot of stuff to juggle at one time. We'll see where it goes next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you think about the stories that you've heard, and you've heard so many, perhaps you could share what's really impacted on you, what you think has been something out of all of those that stands out that you could perhaps share with us.
The most impactful book I ever worked on was a family had come to me with their son's journals and emails. He had passed away the year before in a hit and run accident, and they wanted me to tell his story. And so I had to go into all of his very personal materials and tell his story about being bipolar and the impact the war in Iraq had on him, and how it had changed his mental structure, and the struggle that he had after that. And that was really an honor to me, to be trusted with something so personal. But I would say that every single book that I work on impacts me. And if it didn't, then I wouldn't be working on it, because I'm not going to waste my time or the client's time on something that I don't care about. And so I care about every single one of them and every single person that I talk to. And they're all from all different walks of life and all different types of books. I do children's books, I do memoirs, I do how-tos, I do self-help, I do everything. Because it all comes back to that same thing. What is your story and what message are you trying to get out?
That's interesting, isn't it? And what an amazing thing for his parents to ask you to do.
Yes, it was quite the experience. It really was.
I just think that at times it was that some of the stories that you hear are harrowing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with the emotional legacy that some of these stories offer?
I think the reporter part helps, right? Because I have that little bit of distance from it, because I'm always looking at how can we tell this in a more effective way. I think it just humanizes the client that much more. It really does, because they've been through, like Vance's story, he's been through a lot. His son died, some of his kids stopped talking to him, he spent 28 days in a coma. All of these really personal, heartbreaking details that he shares, and people cry. There are people that work on their books that cry when they talk to me. But then I think it becomes even more important to me to get the story out and to get it right, because it clearly matters so much to them and will to the reader on the other end as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think how often when we hear people's stories, when we're holding that space for them, mm-hmm. how we are changed by that story, mm-hmm. how it impacts, and I'm talking about as a coach, as mm-hmm. a trainer facilitator, how often that story touches you in a way that you are never the same again. Mm-hmm. You see the world differently.
Mm-hmm. And it makes you want to try harder to be a better person, to be a better author, to be a better editor, to be better at whatever I'm doing. There are people that have just such powerful testimonies that make me want to try my best on the page for them.
Yeah, and I would say that it has exactly the same impact in terms mm-hmm. of working with people and wanting to do the best for them. Mm-hmm. So if I asked you, what's your ultimate dream? Most people would look at, 84 books in 24 countries and say, what next?
Right. I know, right? You would think, but there's always another idea. There's always another story I want to tell. And I'm very grateful and lucky that I can both do the nonfiction, which I love, the analytical part of me loves, and do the fiction on the other side. That's just me creating. So I really like doing what I'm doing. I can't imagine doing anything else. And I've been blessed to do it since I was 11. So I can't see stopping or switching careers at this point. I don't have any other life skills. So it's a good thing that they employ me to do this. But yeah, it's the same all the time, just kind of telling stories that have a bigger stage, perhaps, you know, with some people that hit a bigger audience as we go along, so we can make bigger changes in the world.
How do people find you?
JumpStart Creative Solutions is my website, or you can just Google Shirley Jump. You'll get most of my career for the first million hits or whatever. But JumpStart Creative Solutions has my calendar and everything else on it. And I'm on LinkedIn as well if you're looking there, and you can book with me right there on my LinkedIn as well. So yeah, just reach out to me any one of those ways and I'll get back to you.
Brilliant. And so what piece of wisdom would you give to people who are perhaps considering sharing their story? Obviously contact you and have that conversation with you.
Right.
But in terms of them perhaps ordering their thoughts and getting to the place where they're ready to reach out, do you have any advice for people that would help them organize things in a particular way?
So again, I always believe in looking where you want to go. Do you want to speak? Do you want to do coaching? What do you want to do with it? And then come back from that and say, okay, what do these people need to know? What is my main message that I want to get across? And I firmly believe that every word in a book should matter, because when you read one of my books, you're giving me hours of your life that you're not giving to your family or your loved ones, right? So I don't want to waste that time, that precious time that you're giving me. So as you're writing your book, make sure that everything speaks to that theme that you picked out. Don't just put stuff in just to fill up the space. You want it to have an impact as much as possible on every page.
You know, it's interesting. The first time that I wrote a book that was that shared some of my story, I wrote it the first time and I read the book as if I was the reader and thought, you know what, I think I probably slashed my wrists. I don't think this is going to be very helpful. And so wrote it again. It was very cathartic. I took, you know, it was a diary of all of the things that had happened and gone wrong and so on. And if you look at the book now, it's a very, very different animal than it was to start with. So had I had your advice from the start, I could have saved myself a great deal of time.
Right. And it's very common. Most people do that. They really do, because you don't know where to start. No. So you're just trying to sort of corral your thoughts rather than put them down a directed path.
Yeah. And that's one of the real bonuses about working with an expert like yourself, is that you can actually have that direction to start with rather than learning the hard way, as I did in the early stages of my author career.
Right. And I'm very flexible with my clients because everybody's creative process is different. Some want to write some of it and have me edit it. Some want to just do it orally and then I write it. And some do sort of a mixture in between. And we figure that out within the first 3 or 4 chapters, because that's when I'm getting to know them. They're getting to know me and they're understanding the process. And it's a fluid process in the beginning as we figure out what the best way is for them to create their story, which I think they appreciate, because I'm an author too. So I understand both sides of the coin. I understand the creative process and also the editing process.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Now, every guest that comes on the show, we invite to decide which of a project through B1G1, that's Buy One, Give One, which is a worldwide organization that has projects for eradicating poverty, helping people live better lives, helping the environment. And each month I choose 4 projects. And this month the projects are clean water, education, helping the environment, and the 4th one is a project helping children in the Ukraine. And I wondered which of those projects you would like me to invite to donate to on your behalf.
I would say the environment, because if we don't have a world to live in, there's nothing else to do. I raise monarch butterflies in my spare time, and we're working on creating a pollinator garden in the backyard, getting rid of the grass and creating things for pollinators. So my husband and I are pretty passionate about giving back to the world rather than taking from it.
Well, the project that we are donating to plants trees in deforested areas, but works with the local population. So the
Mhm.
idea is that the forest will become sustainable and the people
Mhm.
will look after them, but it's done in such a way that it provides an economic income for the people who actually live there, so they don't need to cut the trees down. So
That's awesome.
we will be donating on your behalf. It just remains
Excellent. Thank
really
you.
for me to say a huge thank you for joining me today. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for having me. It was great. It was a great moment in my day here, and I'm always honored to be able to talk about the work that I do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's always, I'm always humbled by the people who come and join us in our conversations. If you have anything to say, if you'd like to tell us how you enjoy it, or if there are things that you don't like, or you'd like to make suggestions about things you'd like to hear about, then please email me at Gina, Gina, at genuinely-u.com. And you'll find Shirley Jump's books and all of my books on Amazon. So thanks very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next show. Bye-bye now.